Hi, Warren. Hi, Charlie. Great to be here. And this is my first time here. Incredibly lucky to have my question answered. So my question is this. Can you name at least 5 characteristics of a company that gives you confidence to predict its earnings 10 years out in the future? And can you also use IBM as a case study, how it checked all those boxes?
Charlie, what are your 5?
We don't have a one-size-fits-all system for buying businesses. They're all different. Every industry is different. And we also keep learning. So what we did 10 years ago, we hopefully are doing better now. But we can't give you a formula that will help you.
No, if you're looking at the BNSF Railroad, as we were in 2009, or if you're looking at Van Tuyl in 2014, there are a lot of things that go through our minds, and most of the things that go through our minds are things that will stop us from going further. I mean, there's the filters are there, and there are a lot of things that, if we see it in a business, including maybe who we're dealing with, will stop us from going on to the next layer. But it's very different in different businesses. We are looking for things where we do think we've got some reasonable fix on how it's going to look in 5 or 10 years, and that does eliminate a great many businesses. But it's not the same 5 questions at all. Certainly, when we're buying a business where we're going to have somebody that's selling it to us continue to run it for us, a very big question is, do we really want to be in partnership with this person and count on them to behave in the future when they don't own the business as they've behaved in the past when they do own the business? And that stops a fair number of deals. But I can't give you a 5. We don't have a list of 5. Or if we do, Charlie's kept it from me. Want anything more? No. Becky?
This question is for Charlie. It comes from John Baylor. He says, Charlie, you broke Warren of his cigar butt buying habits. With the significant innovation that is occurring in technology, is IBM similar to those textile mills in the 1960s? And did you try to talk Warren out of buying IBM?
The answer is no. I think IBM is a very interesting company. It totally dominated Hollerith machines, the punch card computing. And then when they invented electronic computing, it dominated that for a while. It's very rare that when a technological change comes along that people adapt as successfully as IBM did that time. Well, now they've had the personal computer, and that's been a mixed bag. But I think IBM is a very credible company, and we own a lot of companies that have temporary reverses or once were mightier in some ways than they are now. IBM is still an enormous enterprise, and I think it's still a very admirable enterprise, and I think we bought it at a reasonable price.
When we bought it, it was a 2-0 vote.
Yeah.
Okay. Incidentally, there's one thing that I always find interesting. We get asked questions about investments we own, and people think we want to talk them up, or we have no interest in encouraging other people to buy the investments we own. I mean, we are better off because either we or the company is likely to be buying stock in the future. Why would we want the stock to go up if we're going to be a buyer next year and the year after and the year after that? But the whole mentality of Wall Street is that if you buy something, even if you're going to buy more of it later on, or if the company's going to buy its own stock, and the people seem to think that they're better off if it goes up the next day or the next week or the next month. And that's why they talk about talking your book. If we talked our book from our standpoint, we would say pessimistic things about all 4 of the biggest holdings we have, because all 4 of them are repurchasing their shares, and obviously the cheaper they repurchase their shares, the better off we are. But people don't seem to get that point. You have any idea why, Charlie?
Warren, if people weren't so often wrong, we wouldn't be so rich.
No. He's finally explained it to me. Okay. Gary?
In his letter, Charlie talked about Berkshire's insurance success. Quote, being so astoundingly large that I believe that Buffett would now fail to recreate it if he returned to a small base while retaining his smarts and regaining his youth. Do you agree that you could? So, what do you think are the conditions in the insurance industry today that would inhibit a repeat of that performance?
Well, I had many, many, many pieces of luck, but I had three extraordinary pieces of luck in terms of the insurance business. One was when I was 20 years old, having a fellow on a Saturday, a fellow named Lorimer Davidson, be willing to spend 4 hours with some 20-year-old kid who he never heard of before, explain the insurance business to him. So I received an education at age 20 that I couldn't have gotten at any business school in the United States. And that was just pure luck. I mean, I just happened to go to Washington. I had no idea I would run into him. I had no idea whether he would talk to me. And he spent 4 hours with me. So just chalk that one up, the chances of that happening again. In 1967, I got lucky again when Jack Ringwald, who for about 5 minutes every year wanted to sell his company because he would get mad about something. Some claim had come in that he didn't like or something of the sort. And I told my friend Charlie Hyder, I said, next time Jack is in the mood, be sure and get him to my office. And Charlie got him up there one day, and we bought National Indemnity. We couldn't have done that. We not only couldn't have done that a day later, we couldn't have done it an hour later. But it just, and that was lucky. And then I really got lucky in the mid-'80s when, on a Saturday, some guy came in the office and he said, I've never worked in the insurance business, but maybe I can do you some good. And that was Ajit Jain. And how lucky can you get? So if you ask me whether we could pull off a trifecta like that again in the future, I'd say the odds are very much against it. But the whole thing in business is being open to ideas as they come along, and insurance happened to be something that I could understand. I mean, that was in my sweet spot. If Lorimer Davidson had talked to me about some other business, it wouldn't have done any good. But it just so happened he hit a chord with me on that in explaining it. I could understand what he was talking about, and I could understand what National Indemnity was when Jack had it for sale. And there's an awful lot of accident in life, but if you keep yourself open to having good accidents happen and kind of get past the bad accidents, some good things will happen. Might not happen in insurance, can happen in some other field. Probably would happen in some other field if you were to start in today. So no, we could not have. You couldn't expect to have three lucky events like that happen, and there were many more along the way. But we'd have. I think if we were starting over again, we'd find something else to do. What about it, Charlie?
Yeah, but I don't think we would have that kind of success. Mostly we've bought wonderful businesses and nourished them, but the reinsurance division was just created out of whole cloth right here in Omaha, and it's a huge business. Insurance has been different for us.
This question comes from Simone Wallace in New York. And she writes, over the last 50 years, we Berkshire shareholders have effectively been long sugar consumption through directly owned companies such as See's Candies, Dairy Queen, in funding Heinz, and in publicly traded investments such as Coca-Cola today. Yet from improvements in scientific research, we as a society have become increasingly attuned to the true costs of greater sugar consumption in the form of rising healthcare costs. We are seeing this awareness of sugar's impact in changing consumer behavior. Carbonated soft drink volumes are declining, and consumer packaged good companies focused on the center aisles of supermarkets are struggling with organic growth. If we have we reached an inflection point in human behavior in how consumers view sugar consumption? And do you think Coca-Cola's moat and potentially that of Heinz or Kraft's is narrowing? And if not, what news would it take you to be convinced that it is?
Well, I think it's an enormously wide moat, but I think it's also true that the trends you described are happening. But there will be 1.9 billion 8-ounce servings of Coca-Cola products, not Coca-Cola, but Coca-Cola products consumed in the world today. And I don't think you're going to see anything revolutionary, and I think you will see all food and beverage companies adjust to the expressed preferences of the consumers as they go along. No company ever does well ignoring its consumers, but there will be, I would predict 20 years from now, there will be more people, there will be more Coca-Cola cases consumed than there are now by some margin. Back in the late 1930s, Fortune ran an article saying that the growth of Coca-Cola was all over, and when we bought our Coca-Cola stock in 1988, people were not that enthused about gross profitabilities for the product. I sit here as somebody who, in the last 30 years, 1/4 of all the calories I've consumed come from Coca-Cola. And that is not an exaggeration. I am 1/4 Coca-Cola. I'm not sure which quarter, but if you really, I don't think there is this choice. I think there's a lot to be said about being happy with what you're doing. If I'd been eating broccoli and Brussels sprouts and all that all my life, I don't think I'd live as long. Every meal I would approach thinking, it's like going to jail or something. And no, I think, Charlie? Charlie's 91, and his habits aren't that different than mine. They're slightly better. But
yeah, there's no question about it. The way I look at it is, sugar is an enormously helpful substance. It prevents premature softening of the arteries. And the way I look at it is that if I die a little sooner, that'll just be avoiding a few months of drooling in a nursing home.
Charlie and I have enjoyed every meal we've ever had virtually, except when I was eating at my grandfather's, and he made me eat those damn green vegetables. But there obviously are some shifts in preferences, although it's remarkable how durable items are in this field. Berkshire Hathaway, I believe, was the largest shareholder of General Foods from about 1981 or thereabouts to about 1984 when it was bought by Philip Morris. And that's 30 plus years ago, and those same brands, they went through Philip Morris, they got spun out as Kraft, they broke Kraft into two pieces, but now we're going to own those brands, and they're terrific brands. But, Heinz goes back to 1869. The ketchup came out a little later. They went bankrupt actually when they were counting on the horseradish or whatever it was. But the ketchup came out in the 1870s, and Coca-Cola dates to 1886. And it's a pretty good bet that an awful lot of people are going to like the same thing. And when I compare drinking Coca-Cola, to something that somebody would sell me at Whole Foods, I don't know. I don't see smiles on the faces of people at Whole Foods. So I like the brands we're buying, Andrew. Okay.
This question comes from Mona Diane, and it concerns two indicators, Warren, that you have discussed in the past about the general level of the stock market. The first one is the percentage of total market cap relative to the U.S. GNP, which you have said is probably the best single measure of where valuations stand at any given moment. This indicator is at about 125%. That is the ratio of total market cap to U.S. GNP. And that's about what it was when Warren talked about this back in 1999, just before shortly before the bubble broke. The second indicator, which you mentioned in a famous 1999 speech that subsequently became an article in Fortune, is corporate profits as percent of GNP. You had said at the time that number ranged between 4% to 6.5% over a long period of time, which I believe was 1951 to 1999. Well, as of Friday, it is about 10.5% according to the St. Louis Federal Reserve site. That is way above the range you had mentioned. Are the current levels of either one or both of these indicators a matter of concern for the general investing public?
Yeah. Well, it might be the second figure, which is the profits as a percentage of GDP, might be a concern for other segments of society, because what it indicates is that American business has done wonderfully well in recent years, and though it says what a terrible disadvantage it has because of U.S. tax rates and a host of other things, the facts are that American business has prospered incredibly. And the first comparison is very much affected by the fact that we live in an interest rate environment which Charlie and I probably would have thought was almost impossible not too many years ago. And obviously, profits are worth a whole lot more if the government bond yield is 1% than they're worth if the government bond yield is 5%. And so it gets back, and Charlie in that movie talked about alternatives and opportunity cost. And for many people, the opportunity cost is owning a lot of bonds, which pay practically nothing, or owning stocks, which are selling at fairly high prices historically, but they weren't selling at those historic prices with interest rates like this. So I would not, I look at those numbers, but I also look at them in the context of the fact that we're living in a world that has incredibly low interest rates, and the question is how long those are going to prevail. Is it going to be something like Japan that goes on decade after decade, or will we be back to what we thought was normal interest rates? If we get back to what are normal interest rates, stocks at these prices will look pretty high. If we continue with these kind of interest rates, stocks will look very cheap. And now I've given you the answer, and you can take your pick. Charlie?
Well, since we failed to predict what happened and what exists now, why would anybody ask us what our prediction is in the future?
Yeah. Incidentally, the one thing I can assure you, Charlie and I, to my knowledge or my memory, I can't recall ever us making an acquisition or turning down one based on macro factors. That and we talk about deals when they come along, but whether it was See's Candy or whatever it might have been, the Burlington Northern, we bought at a terrible time, general economic conditions. But we don't talk. It just doesn't come up because we know we don't know what the next 12 months, 24 months, 30, we know we don't know what that's going to look like, but it doesn't really make any difference if we're buying a business to hold for 100 years. What we have to do is figure out what's likely to be the average profitability of the business over time and how strong its competitive moat is and that sort of thing. So people have trouble believing that. They think we talk about it. We think any company that has an economist, certainly has one employee too many. Charlie? Yeah. Did you think of anything rude to say that I haven't said?
Well, it would be hard to top that one.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Leonid Sagalovsky. I'm from Chicago, Illinois, and Berkeley, California. I'd like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to ask this question. This is my first meeting. I tend to attend once every 50 years. And also for your essay on, both of your essays on the past, present, and future of Berkshire. As we reflect on the last 50 years, I'd like to ask you this question. What was your most memorable failure, and how did you deal with it? Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we've discussed Dexter many times in the annual report, where I, back in the mid-1990s, I looked at a shoe business in Dexter, Maine, and decided to pay $400 or so million for something that was destined to go to zero in a few years. And I didn't figure that out. And then on top of that, I gave the purchase price in stock, and I guess that stock would be worth, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 billion now. It makes me feel better when the stock goes down because the stupidity gets reduced. Nobody misled me on that in any way. I just looked at it and came up with the wrong answer. But I would say almost any time we've issued shares, it's been a mistake. Wouldn't you say that, Charlie?
Of course.
Yeah.
We don't do it much anymore.
No. We probably could have pushed harder, particularly in the earlier years. We've always been, we've had all of our own net worth in the company. We've had all our family's net worth, and we've had all these friends that came out of our partnership, many of whom put half or more of their net worth with us. And so we've been very, very, very cautious in what we've done, and there probably were times when we could have stretched a little and pulled off something quite large that we made a mistake looking back. But I wouldn't want to take a 1% chance, of wiping out my Aunt Katie's net worth or something. It's just not something in life that I could live with. So I would rather be, 100 times too cautious than 1% too incautious, and that will continue as long as I'm around. But people looking at our past would say that we missed some big opportunities that we understood and could have swung if we'd wanted to go out and borrow more money. Charlie?
Well, it's obviously true. If we had used the leverage that a lot of successful operators did, Berkshire would be a lot bigger.
A lot bigger.
A lot bigger. But we would have been sweating at night. It's crazy to sweat at night.
Over financial things.
Over financial things, yes. Yeah.
Well, we won't pursue that. Carol?
Do you see the potential for further consolidation in the industry with a firm like Kraft Heinz emerging as a big consolidator? Or do you feel that Nestle's more recent squawking about the deal and 3G Capital's reputation as being a bit heavy-handed with cost-cutting being enough to keep further consolidation at bay?
Well, there will be deals in the future. I mean, they're bound to be. But the strong brands, just look at the ones that General Foods had in the 1980s and the ones that Kraft has now that come from that same company. And I mean, Coca-Cola sold more cases of beverages last year than any year in their history, and they'll sell more this year. I mean, it's a strong brand is really potent stuff. I mean, take Heinz ketchup or something of the sort. It's 60% brand share in the United States, but it's much higher in many other countries. So you'll always have the fight between the retailer and the brand. And the retailer is going to use all the pressure they've got, and therefore the brand has to stand for something in the consumer's mind, because in the end, the retailer may want to shift to a house brand, private label, private labels have been around forever in the soft drink field. I mean, I can remember when I was looking at Cott Beverage and all of those and thinking, what will it do to us? I remember when Sam Walton sent me the first six-pack. He told me it was the first six-pack of Sam's Cola 20 years ago. And believe me, Walmart has plenty of power, but so does Coca-Cola. And the brand, you've got to nourish them. You've got to take very, very, very good care of them. They have to stand for the promise that's in people's mind about them. But a lot of people have tried to, I don't know how many dozens or maybe hundreds of cola beverages there have been over the years. RC Cola, they came up with the first diet product back in the early 60s. And that looked like a big maneuver. Wilkinson came up with the blade back in the 60s after Gillette. But Gillette ends up with 70% by dollar value worldwide of razor blades after 100 years. So you've got to protect a brand. You've got to enhance it in every way. You've got to get a promise in people's minds that gets delivered that way. But that's the question Charlie and I faced in 1972 when we looked at See's. See's was selling for $1.95 a pound. Russell Stover was selling a little cheaper. And you had to decide how much damage could a Russell Stover do if they came after See's and they copied our shops and all that sort of thing. If you protect a brand, if you got a terrific brand and you protect it, it's a fabulous asset. But you'll always have trouble dealing with Costco and Walmart and the rest of the guys, Kroger, and you name it. They're tough too. But the great brands will survive and the great retailers will do well. Charlie?
Well, we've almost exhausted this topic. There's no question about the fact that waves of layoffs frighten people. A job is a very important part of a person's life, and it's no small thing to lose it. So, but on the other hand, I don't think what would our country be if we'd kept everybody on the farms? All this prosperous group would be pitching hay and milking cows at 4 a.m. No, we need our businesses to be right-sized.
Very exciting. Yeah, what? Very exciting to see my superstars here. I'm Leo, a value investor from China and a loyal fan of you and Charlie. Many Chinese investors feel all kinds of performance pressure, question, and even laughing at value investing. Many also believe that value investing does not apply to China, where the stock market just doubled over the last 6 months. I would like to ask Mr. Buffett, do you think value investment can be widely applied in all markets or just for mature markets, just as the ones in the United States? Do you have any suggestions for value investors to hold against pressure and to be much happy? Thank you.
Okay, I'm not sure I got all of it, but Charlie will help me. I certainly think investment principles do not stop at borders. So if I were investing in China or any place else, India, UK, Germany, I would apply exactly the same sort of principles that I learned from the intelligent investor. I would think of stocks as a small piece of a business. I would think of investment fluctuations being there to benefit me rather than to hurt me. And I would try to focus my attention on businesses that where I thought I understood the competitive advantage they had and what they would look like in 5 or 10 years. So I don't think I would change the principles at all. I'm not sure I got all of the question. Maybe Charlie can elaborate on the rest.
Well, the Chinese have a history of being very entrepreneurial and of gambling very heavily when they have the opportunity. And it has created great volatility in the Chinese stock markets. And when things get bouncy and prosperous like our internet craze here in the United States, China looks a lot like Silicon Valley. I think China would do way better to be more value investor minded and less absorbed in waves of speculation. So I think the more China copies the way Berkshire operates, I think the better it'll be for China.
Yeah, there's a certain irony in that we would do the best over decades if we operated in a market where people operated very foolishly. And the more people respond to short-term events and exaggerated things or anything that causes people to get wildly enthusiastic or wildly depressed actually is what allows people to make lots of money in securities. And on the other hand, it's not the greatest thing for a society. And Charlie and I have benefited enormously by the fact that over a 50-year period, there have been a few periods, probably the most extraordinary being 1973 and 74, where you could buy stocks unbelievably cheap, cheaper than happened in 2008 and 2009. And, you know, it doesn't make sense to have that much volatility in the market, but humans behave the way humans behave, and they're going to continue to behave that way in the next 50 years. I mean, if you're a young investor and you can sort of stand back and value stocks as businesses and invest when things are very cheap, no matter what anybody is saying on television or what you're reading, and perhaps, if you wish, sell when people get terribly enthused, it is really not a very tough intellectual game. It's an easy game if you can control your emotions. And as Charlie says, that he thinks, we've talked about a little bit, that the Chinese market may be more, there may be more speculative influences in it even than in the United States, because it's a relatively new development and it may lend itself to greater extremes. And that should produce great opportunities. Charlie?
Yeah, but there are great opportunities for excess and nasty contractions after unnatural booms and so on. I think China is wise to dampen the speculative booms, and I think the Chinese, I don't think the value investing will ever go out of style. Who in the hell doesn't want value when you buy something? How can there be anything else that makes any sense except value investing?
It never gets that popular, though.
People are looking for an easier way,
yeah.
and that's a mistake. It looks easier, but in fact it's harder. And there's a lot of misery to be obtained by misusing stocks.
Yeah, nobody buys a farm to make a lot of money next week or next month, or they buy it, an apartment house. They buy it based on what they think the long-term future is, and if they make a reasoned calculation of that and the purchase price looks attractive, they buy it, and then they don't get a quote on it every day or every week or every month or even every year. And that's probably a better way to look at stocks. Carol?
Mr. Buffett, you have expressed your optimism about the future of America many times and have often made the point that the U.S. simply has a superior economic system. But my question, and this is from Christopher Gaccio of New York City, my question concerns the risk of chemical, nuclear, biological, and cybersecurity problems. How do these threats affect your outlook?
Well, they are the great threat to the United States. We have and will have a wonderful economic system. Your children are going to live better than you do, and your grandchildren are going to live better than they do. And that is there are fits and starts and ups and downs, but just go outside or as you fly home, just imagine what you're flying over looked like in 1776. And everything since then is profit. I mean, the farms are incredibly more productive. The cities have grown. It's all here, and that's all come from unleashing the energies and brains of the American people in a system that has worked quite well despite all the deficiencies that we talk about all the time. So that hasn't been lost at all. And people get upset because we're having 2% growth. Well, 2% growth with 1% population growth means 20% gain in a generation. And 20% on 54,000 of GDP per capita is another 10,000 of GDP per capita coming in the next generation. This country has a wonderful future, but as the questioner pointed out, that can all be nullified by either madmen or rogue states or religious fanatics or sociopaths or whatever it may be who wish to have access to weapons of mass destruction and to nuclear, which is I used to think was the primary one. You can now add biological and chemical and cyber, and there will be an increasing number. There already are a huge number of people that would wish harm, and particularly on the United States, although on others as well. And those people aren't going to go away, and they're going to look for more ingenious ways of utilizing the raw materials that they have or might get access to, and better delivery systems. And we need an extremely vigilant security operation in the United States, and we will have threats. I do a little bit about those things in a few ways, but that's something we live with. But we also live in a country that is going to do extraordinarily well, and if we successfully ward off those threats or at least minimize their impact on us, I still maintain that the luckiest person ever born in history on a probabilistic basis is the baby being born in the United States today. Charlie?
Well, of course, we were a favored place, and we've had a favored outcome, and we've been lucky too. I think I probably lived in the most ideal era that any man in human history could have been born into. I think you too. You have too, Warren.
Right.
But I don't think we should get too smug. China has come up a lot faster than any other big nation ever came up. And
but that's good for us.
Well, I think I can hardly think of anything more important than future close collaboration between the United States and China. And you're talking about the two most important nations in the world going forward. And I think it is very important that we like and trust one another and have very good relations and work together to avoid bad consequences that come from other people's mistakes and misbehavior. So I think both China and the United States would be crazy not to collaborate and increase trust. I don't think there's anything more important that we can do for our respective safety and for the general benefit of the world.
If you had your choice, would you rather be being born now with all the qualities you've got, or when you were born?
Well, I must say it's very interesting now. I think that's too tough a question. I don't like these very theoretical questions. I'd rather think about something where I might gain some advantage or help somebody else to gain an advantage.
Okay, then we'll move on to Jonathan.
This is a question from John Wells right here in Omaha, and he says, you've described inflation as a gigantic corporate tapeworm. Which of Berkshire's businesses are best suited to thrive during a period of high inflation, and why? Which will suffer the most, and why?
Yeah, well, the best businesses during inflation are usually the best. They're the businesses that you buy once and then you don't have to keep making capital investments subsequently. So you do not face the problem of continuous reinvestment involving greater and greater dollars because of inflation. That's one reason real estate in general is good during inflation. If you built your own house 55 years ago like Charlie did, or bought one 55 years ago like I did, it's a one-time outlay. Whereas if and you get an inflationary expansion in replacement capital without having to replace yourself. And if you got something that's useful to someone else, it tends to be priced in terms of replacement value over time. So you really get the inflationary kick. Now, if you're in a business such as the utility business or the railroad business, it just keeps eating up more and more money, and your depreciation charges are inadequate, and you're kidding yourself as to your real economic profits. So any business with heavy capital investment tends to be a poor business to be in inflation, and often it's a poor business to be in generally. And the business where you buy something once, a brand is a wonderful thing to own during inflation. See's Candy built their brand many years ago. Now we've had to nourish it as we've gone along, but the value of that brand increases during inflation, just as the value of really any strongly branded goods. Gillette bought the entire radio rights to the World Series in 1939. And as I remember, it cost them $100,000, and for that they got to broadcast the Yankees, I think, versus the Reds in 1939. And think of the number of impressions they made on minds in 1939 for $100,000. And they were getting into the minds of young guys like myself. I was 8 or 9, and millions of people. And they did it in those dollars then. And of course, if you were going to go out and try and have a similar impressions on millions of minds now, it costs a fortune. And part of that's due to inflation, part of it's due to other things. But it was a great investment which could be made in 1939 that paid off in terms of selling razors and blades in 1960 and 1970 and 1980 dollars. So that's the kind of business you want to own. Charlie?
Well, yeah, but if the inflation ever goes completely out of control, you have no idea how it's going to end up. If it weren't for the Weimar inflation, we might never have had Adolf Hitler. It was the twosome of the great German inflation followed by the Great Depression that brought us Hitler. And think of the price that the world paid for that one. We don't want inflation because it's good for See's Candy.
No, I didn't quite realize I was proposing that.
I wasn't criticizing it.
What's good for See's Candy is good for the United States. Okay, Gary.
So in this year's annual letter, Charlie wrote about the peculiar attributes that made the Berkshire system and the leader of the system a historically organizational entity. So my question to both of you is, what practical mental model or mental models would you impress upon a young, enterprising individual at the infancy of their career to build an important, enduring enterprise of that particular distinction and impact? And if you could give maybe some contrasting examples, like why is it Microsoft able to build itself into a dominating monolithic company versus a See's Candy, which can be a great enterprise to spin off cash flow, but not necessarily be an enduring, or not necessarily enduring, but an impactful enterprise to the level of a Berkshire or a Microsoft?
Thank you, Warren.
You're the guy that wrote it. This is pineapple juice, incidentally. People were questioning that. They say it's good for your throat if you're going to talk a long time.
Yes, well, of course, reputation you get over a long period of time. Very few people are like Charles Lindbergh, where you just suddenly have a great reputation. Most of us have to acquire one very slowly, and that was true in Berkshire's case. And in any individual, you just have to get the best reputation you can in the years you're allotted and the time available. And it may work out well, it may work out poorly, but it's a wise investment. I see all the time opportunities come to people where it's the credibility they've gotten in the past that causes them to have the new opportunity. So I think hardly anything is more important than behaving well as you go through life. And I think we actually try to behave better as we got more prosperous. And I think you'd be crazy if you didn't. So I certainly recommend that you follow those old-fashioned principles. And I don't think there's any way of guaranteeing a total powerhouse brand, nor can, if a result is a 1 in 50 million type result, you're probably not going to get them.
Johnny Agnelli of Fiat, back in, I think it was 1988, I was at dinner with him one time, and he said something to me that stuck with me. He said, when you get old, he says, you'll have the reputation you deserve. He said, for a while you can fool people, but he says, when he was talking about himself at the time, but he said, when you get to be my age, he says, whatever reputation you have, it's probably the one you deserve. And I think the same is true of companies. And frankly, it has helped Berkshire a whole lot that it has gotten a reputation to be a somewhat different sort of company. I mean, I don't think we set out to do that exactly, but it has worked out that way.
This question, which is a little bit offbeat, comes from Jordan Shapoff of Melbourne, Australia. Mr. Buffett, in the foreword to the 6th edition of Benjamin Graham's Security Analysis, you identified 4 books that you particularly cherish. 3 of these books were authored by Graham himself, and their influence on you is well known. The contributions of the 4th book to your thinking, however, that book was Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations, published in 1776. What that book meant to you is seldom discussed. So my question is, what did you learn from The Wealth of Nations, and how did it shape your investment and business philosophy?
Well, it doesn't shape my investment philosophy, but I certainly learned economics from it. And my friend Bill Gates gave me an original copy of it. I was able to study it as Adam Smith wrote it in 1776. There's just, if you read Adam Smith, and if you read Keynes, Ricardo, and if you also read that little book we've got out there called "Where Are the Customers' Yachts," you will have a lot of wisdom. I forgot to mention, I was supposed to mention too, that we didn't want to put it on sale earlier because it would have given away the movie, but we do have Berkshire Bomber underwear out there, or sweatshirts, or whatever it may be. So Fruit of the Loom has those, and we have Fred Schwed's "Where Are the Customers' Yachts" book, which contains an incredible amount of wisdom in very few pages and very entertaining. But if you want to not only get a lot more wisdom but appear more erudite, you should read The Wealth of Nations also. Charlie?
Well, yeah, this guy is really worn well. I mean, he is rightly recognized as one of the wisest people that ever came along. And of course, the lessons that he taught way back then were taught again when communism failed so terribly, and people like Singapore and Taiwan and China and so forth came up so fast. The productive power of the capitalist system is simply unbelievable. And he understood that fully and early, and he's done a lot of good.
I took an idea of his on the specialization of labor, and he talked about people making pins or something, but I applied that actually to philanthropy. I mean, the idea that you let other people do what they're best at and stick with what you're best at, I've carried from mowing my lawn to philanthropy, and it's a wonderful thing to just shove off everything and saying somebody else is better than that, and then I am at that, and then work in the field that's most productive for you.
You didn't do your own bowel surgery either.
No. I'm not sure I have any reply to that. Okay, Jonathan.
My name is Neil Gonedi Wall from South Florida, and I'm currently in 7th grade. My question is, how do you make lots of friends and get people to like you and work with you?
That's not a bad question. Very good question.
Well, I was pretty obnoxious when I was your age and asked a lot of impertinent questions. And not everybody liked me. And so the only way I could get the people to like me a little bit was to get very rich and very generous. That will work.
People will see all kinds of virtues in you if they think you'll write a check. Yeah, the truth is, both Charlie and I were on the obnoxious side early on, but you should get a little smarter about human behavior as you get older, and I turned out to have some pretty good teachers as I went along in terms of what worked. I mean, I have looked at other people during my lifetime and had these wonderful teachers. They weren't teachers in the standard definition, but they were people I admired, and I thought to myself, why do I admire these people? And if I want to be admired myself, why shouldn't I take on some of their qualities? So it's not a complicated proposition. If you look around you at the people you like in your school, write down 3 or 4 things they do that make you like them, and then look around at the 3 or 4 people that turn you off, and write down those qualities and decide that you're going to be a person you yourself would like, that you take on the qualities of the person on the left. You're generous, you're friendly, you accept things with good humor, you don't claim credit for things you don't do, all of these things, and they're all possible to do. And if you like that in other people, people are going to like it in you. And if you find things that are kind of obnoxious, you're always late, and you're always claiming credit for more than you do, and you're kind of negative on everything, and you don't like those in other people, get rid of them in yourself, and you'll find out it works pretty well.
And it really works in marriage. If you can change yourself instead of trying to change your spouse, that's a good idea.
Charlie has said the most important thing in selecting a marriage partner is that you don't look for intelligence or humor or character. He says you look for someone with low expectations.
At the annual meeting a couple of years ago, I asked about your estate plan and your idea of leaving kids enough so they can do anything, but not so much that they can do nothing. Today, I'd like to ask you about your decision to sign the Giving Pledge, promising to give away at least 1/2 of your assets to charity. Can you talk about your views on philanthropy and how to balance leaving an inheritance to your family versus assets to charity?
Well, it depends very much on the individual situation. And actually, I promised to give over 99% in my case. But that still leaves plenty left over. As you know, the estate tax exemption has been moved up substantially here in the last couple of years. So I might have a very different feeling if I'd had a child that had worked actively, helped me build the business and all of that sort of thing, and it was a small business, and I wanted to give it to them. But that can be really done without any estate tax these days, particularly if a little planning is used ahead of time. it's a very individual thing. As Charlie, when you get to the figuring out what you do with your money, the options get fairly limited. And as Charlie said the other day, he said where he's going, it won't do him much good anyway. There's no Forbes 400, in the graveyard. And so the question is, where does it do the most good? And I think it does limited amounts do some real good for my children. So I'll be sure that they have that, or they already have it to a degree. And on the other hand, when I look at a bunch of stock certificates in a safe deposit box that were put there 50 years ago or so, they have absolutely no utility to me. Zero. They can't do anything for me in life. I mean, they can't let me consume 7,000 calories a day instead of 3,000. They can't. There's nothing they can do. I've got everything in the world I want. I've had it for decades. If I wanted something additionally, I go buy it. So here these things are that have no utility to me, and they have enormous utility to some people in other parts of the world. I mean, they can save lives, they can provide vaccines, they can provide education. There are all kinds of utility. So why in the world should they sit there, for me or for, some fourth generation down of great-grandchildren or something, when they can do a lot of good now? So that's my own philosophy on it. But I think everybody has to develop their own feelings about it and should follow where they go. I do think they might ask themselves, where will it do the most good? And it can be pretty dramatic between what it can do for millions of people that don't really have remotely the same shot at having a decent life that I've had, or what it can do for me. I mean, if I could have 10 houses, but I could buy a hotel to live in, or something. What would I be happier? It'd be crazy. Charlie and I have both like fairly simple lives, but the one thing we do know is we know what we like and what we don't like, and we don't judge it by what other people like. So I don't have too much advice for anybody, but I would say start thinking about it. When I call people on the Giving Pledge, some of them, I'll get some 70-year-old and he says, I don't want to think about it yet, and I always tell them, well, are you going to make a better decision when you're 95 with some blonde on your lap, or something? That actually was tried a few years ago, as you may know. Charlie?
No, but it does occur to me that fellow who was complaining about the tax system should remember that when they've recently changed the estate tax rules, so you can leave $5 million to your kids and so forth. I think that's a very constructive change in the laws. So I don't think we should assume that our politicians are always going to be totally crazy. That was a very desirable change, I think.
Charlie, question about activism. Activism continues to grow, and as Charlie stated at the 2014 annual meeting, he sees it getting worse instead of getting better. So the question is, we hope that Charlie and Warren will both be around forever, but unfortunately there will be a time when they're no longer here to manage the store.
I reject such defeatism.
If Warren is giving away his shares to charity over a 10-year period through his estate plan and activists become increasingly more powerful, how will Berkshire defend itself from activists in the near and far future? And would you consider it a failure if Berkshire were broken up in the future and shareholders received a significant premium? And for you to consider it success, what would the premium need to be?
Yeah. Well, if it's run right, there won't be a premium in breaking it up. It may look like it. I mean, people will say there's subsidiary A that would sell at 20 times earnings and the whole place is selling at 15. But the whole place won't sell at 15 if you spin off the one at 20. I mean, I laid out in the annual report, there are a lot of benefits to Berkshire in terms of having the companies in the same corporate tax return. So I think it's unlikely that on any long-term basis or an intermediate-term basis that the value of the parts will be greater than the value of the whole. The best defense against activism is performance. But lately, there's been so much money pouring into activist funds because it's been easy to raise money for that. I mean, it's been a successful way of handling money for the last few years, and institutional money then starts flowing into it, and the consultants recommend it and all of that sort of thing. And so I would say that much of what I see as activism now, people are really reaching in terms of what they're of the kind of companies that they're talking about and the claims of what they can do and that sort of thing. I think the biggest, if you're talking about my shares getting dispensed over 10 years after my estate's settled and the voting power they have, and I think by the time that gets to be a reality, I think the market value of Berkshire is likely to be so great that even if all the activists gathered together, they wouldn't be able to do very much about it. Berkshire is likely to really be a very, very large organization 10 or 20 years from now.
Besides, the Buffett super voting power is going to last a long time.
It lasts a long time, yeah. I always, I've got these friends that call me when other companies and they've got an activist and they're worried about it. I just tell them to send them over to Berkshire. We'll welcome them. We'd love to have them buy our stock because they're not going to get any place. And that's going to be the situation for a long, long time. We should be a place where people can dump their activists. Charlie?
Well, the thing that I find interesting is in the old days when most stocks sold for way less than they were worth in terms of intrinsic value, it was very rare to find an American corporation buying the stock in.
Oh, yeah.
Now, in many cases, the activists are urging corporations to buy the stock in heavily, even though it's selling for more than it's worth. This is not a constructive activity, and it's not a desirable change, and it's not a very responsible activity for the activists.
There's been more stupid stuff written on such a simple activity as stock repurchase. Most stupid stuff written and stupid stuff done. I mean, it's a very simple decision, in my view, as to whether you repurchase your shares. You repurchase them if you've taken care of the needs of the business and your stock is selling for less than it's intrinsically worth. But that, I don't see how anything could be more simple. If you had a partnership and a partner wanted to sell out to you at 120% of what the business is worth, you'd say forget it. And if you want to sell out to you at 80% of what's worth, you'd take it. It's not complicated. But there's so many other motivations that have entered into people's minds about deciding whether to repurchase shares or not. It's gotten to be a very contorted and kind of silly discussion in many cases. And Charlie is right. If you look at the history of share repurchases, it falls off like crazy when stocks are cheap, and it tends to go up dramatically when stocks get fully priced. But it's not what we'll do at Berkshire. At Berkshire, we will presently, we would love to buy it by the bushel basket at 120% of book because we know it's worth a lot more than that. We don't know how much more, but we know it's worth a lot more. And we don't get a chance to do that very often. But if we do get a chance, we'll do it big time. But we won't buy it in at 200% of book because it isn't worth it. And it's not a complicated question, but people that I've been around a lot of managements that announce they're going to buy X worth, and then they buy it regardless of price. And a lot of times the price makes sense, but if it doesn't, they don't seem to stop, and nobody seems to want to stop them. Charlie?
Well, I certainly agree with you.
Okay.
I don't think it's a great age, this age of activism.
You want to expand on that?
Well, it's hard for me to think of many activists I want to marry into the family.
I better stop before he names names. Okay. Greg.
Warren, American Express, which is Berkshire's third largest stock holding, has relied on powerful network effects and its valuable brand to generate excess economic profits over the years. It has created a virtuous cycle, with its collection of cardholders being desirable to merchants who have been willing to pay higher transaction fees, with those fees ending up funding rewards programs and services for American Express's cardholders. More recently, though, competitors have turned this model against the firm, targeting its cardholder base with ever-increasing levels of rewards and services while charging merchants lower fees than American Express does. The company also saw its image of exclusivity take a bit of a hit earlier this year when Costco ended a 16-year relationship with the firm, a move that affects 1 in 10 American Express cards in circulation and which will impact results this year and next. With restrictions on interchange fees and the growth and acceptance of mobile payment technologies likely to impact future revenue streams, and moves by the firm to go down market in pursuit of transaction volume, potentially diminishing the brand, how does American Express defend its moat?
Well, American Express has been pretty good at that, and particularly when Ken Chenault's been running it. It will be, all aspects of payments will be subject to lots of innovation and various modes of attack. I think that American Express is still a very special company, and like I say, Ken has done a sensational job in anticipating a lot of these trends and guiding it into different markets. As you mentioned, it's gone down into debit cards effectively and things of that sort. I think there's a lot of loyalty with American Express cardholders. I do think a proprietary card is worth more than a co-branded card, but I think that I probably shouldn't get into the specifics of Costco. I've got a Costco director sitting next to me. But we're very happy with American Express, but we'll be even happier if the stock goes down and the $4 or $5 billion they spend a year buying in stock buys even more shares. Charlie?
Well, I liked it a little better when they had a little less competition, but that's life.
Hey, incidentally, you'll find in this 50-year history of Berkshire, American Express did wonders for us back in the 1960s, and there's a little history on there on the fact that it was an accessible stock until 1965, which nobody paid any attention until in 1963 on. But the company has an incredible history of adapting. I mean, they started out as an express company, moved trunks around and valuables around, and then the railroad came along and started doing the same thing. So they went to traveler's checks as a way to very, very handy way of moving money around the world. And then the credit card came along, Diners Club came along in the 1950s, and that threatened the traveler's check. And then they moved into the travel and entertainment card, it was called then. And the interesting thing is that Diners Club, who was first, Ralph Schneider and Al Bloomingdale, priced their card at, as I remember, $3. And they looked like they were sewing up the market. And American Express came along and did something very interesting. They priced their card, I think, at $5 and actually established a better image. I mean, people that pull out their American Express card at a dinner table, they look like J.P. Morgan, and the guy that pulled out a Diners Club card had a whole bunch of flashy things on it. He looked like a guy who was kiting his expense account or something of the sort. So you just automatically felt like a more important person with your American Express card. They have been very nimble and very smart, and particularly in recent years under Ken, in terms of meeting all kinds of things. They'll have plenty of challenges in the future, and I'm delighted we own 15% of the company.
My name is Chang, originally from Seoul, South Korea, and working in Los Angeles, California. I've been traveling more than 27 countries, and last year I taught financial literacy lesson in one of the local elementary schools in Bellevue City. Today here we're talking about investments and capital markets, but young students in developing countries, they don't know how to save money, or they don't know the concept of interest. So in order to overcome the educational challenges, I would like to provide volunteer opportunities to talented Americans to teach in South American schools to overcome while they're traveling. So what do you think about my plan, or do you have any advice? Thank you.
Charlie, do you have any advice?
Well, I failed in this activity with some of my relatives, so I don't think I can improve South America. No, I think if you don't know how to save, I can't help you.
No, but the important thing is to get good habits early on.
Yeah.
You really, someone said the chains of habit are too light to be felt until they're too heavy to be broken. And habits really make an enormous difference in your life. So Andy and Amy Hayward have developed the Secret Millionaires Club, which I've helped out with a little. And our goal is to, in an entertaining way, present good habits to young kids through a kind of a comedy series. And I think it's actually having a pretty good effect. And here in a few days, we're going to have here in Omaha, we're going to have 8 finalists in young kids from around the country that have developed businesses of their own. And I'm always enormously impressed with these kids. But the importance of developing good habits yourself or encouraging good habits in your children very early on in respect to money can change their lives. And I was $9,000 or $10,000 ahead when I got out of college, and I got married young and had kids very fast. And if I hadn't had that start, my life would have been vastly different. So you can't start young enough on working on good money habits. And I do think that I think the Secret Millionaires Club is very good, but there could be lots of other good ways of teaching those lessons.
Hi, Mr. Buffett and Munger. Very excited to be here. My name is Liu Yu, also from Shanghai, China. Because now I'm in a company providing wealth management to the high net wealth individuals in China. The company name is Noah from Noah's Ark, listed at NYSE. You two are my idols. What's your secrets of keeping so young, so energetic, and so quick? Please don't say because of Coca-Cola. And someone said that old Papa could not understand the internet, but I don't believe that. What's your opinion? Will you pay more attention to internet? Could I invite both two gentlemen to answer my question? Thank you very much.
Charlie, I didn't get all that. So you.
Well, he asked that we're going to be using the internet. Warren is a big internet user compared to me. But
I love it.
He plays bridge on it.
Yeah, I use a lot of I use search. It's been a huge change in my life, and it cost me $100 a year or something like that. I mean, if I had to give up the plane or I had to give up the internet, the plane cost me $1.5 million a year. The internet cost me $100 a year. I wouldn't want to give up either one of them, but I'd give up the plane.
Interesting. But
Charlie's given up both.
Are we going to be doing more? And I think everybody's going to be doing more things on the internet. It is growing in importance. And so, like it or not, we're dragged into modern reality.
Doesn't sound like he likes it, does it?
No, I don't like it. I don't like multitasking. I see these people doing 3 things at once, and I think, God, what a terrible way that is to think. I am so stupid that I have to think hard about a thing for a long time, and the idea of multitasking my way to glory has never occurred to me. But at any rate, the internet is here, and it's going to be more and more important, and everybody's going to think more about it and do more about it, like it or not. And of course, the younger people are way more prone to use it than we are. But Berkshire, you have what? How many Bloombergs now?
In the office?
Yeah.
Do we have 2 or 3? Mark? I don't know. They don't tell me about them. They sort of hide them when I come in the room.
At any rate, we're into the modern world.
We have Mark Hamburg tells me we have 3, but we'll reevaluate that situation when I get back to the office. What's that? Oh, we're not paying for one. Well, I like that. Let's see if we can not pay for 2. No, the internet, and it's changed many of our businesses. I mean, it's changed Geico's business very, very dramatically, and it affects them all to one degree or another. So it's amazing to me. I mean, people get pessimistic about America, and just think in the last 20 or 25 years, or well, just 20 years on the internet, how dramatically it's changed your life. It's not over yet. There's all kinds of things are going to happen to make life better. And Charlie may not think the internet makes life better, but when I compare trying to round up 3 other guys on a snowy day to come over to my house to play bridge versus snapping the thing on and having my partner in San Francisco there and 2 other friends and so on in 10 or 20 seconds, I think the world has improved.
Thank you for taking my question. My name is Brandon Chen. I'm from Taipei, Taiwan. My question is, China is undergoing a number of structural changes. When you take the pulse of the Chinese economy, what do you read and what advice would you give? Thank you.
Charlie's the China expert. I think China's going to do very fine over a period of time.
Yeah, I'm a big fan for what's happening in China. And as a matter of fact, I've just prepared a bust of Lee Kuan Yew, the recently deceased ex-prime minister of Singapore, because I think he's contributed so much to fixing first Singapore and then China. And one of the things Lee Kuan Yew did in Singapore was to stop the corruption, including cashiering some of his close friends. And China's doing the same thing. And I consider it the smartest damn thing I've seen a big country do in a long, long time. And I think that it's hard to set the proper example if the leading political rulers are kleptocrats. You don't want to be run by a den of thieves. You want responsible people. And what Lee Kuan Yew did is he paid the civil servants way better and recruited very good people. And he just created a better system. And of course, China is widely copying him. And it's a wonderful thing they're doing. So I'm very high on what's going on in China. And I think it's very likely to work. They've actually shot a few people. That really gets people's attention.
Now we're starting to get some practical advice here. What has happened in China, over the last 40 or so years? I mean, it just strikes me as just totally miraculous. I don't think I would not have believed that a country could move so far, so fast. A country that size, particularly, so far, so fast, and
it never happened before in the history of the world that a company so big had come so far. When I was a little boy, 80% of the population of China was illiterate and mired in subsistence, poverty, and agriculture. Now and they've been through horrible wars, and look at them. It's one of the most remarkable achievements in the history of the earth. And a few people made an extreme contribution to it, including this Chinese politician in Singapore. And I give the Communist Party a lot of credit for copying Lee Kuan Yew. That's all Berkshire does is copy the right people.
Yeah, in 1790, the United States had 4 million people. China had 290 million people. They were just as smart as we were. They worked as hard, similar climate, similar soil. And for close to 200 years, the United States went with those 4 million people to close to 25% of the world's GDP. And China really didn't go anyplace. And then those same people in 40 years, and they're not working harder now than they were 40 years ago. They're not smarter now than they were 40 years ago in terms of the basic intelligence. And just look at what's been accomplished. I mean, it does show you the human potential when you find a system that unleashes it. And we found a system that unleashed human potential a couple hundred years ago, and they found a system that unleashed human potential 40 or 50 years ago. And when you see that example, it has to have a powerful effect on what happens in the future. And it's just amazing that you could have people go nowhere basically in their lives for centuries, and then it explodes, and it just blows me away to see it. And you make it's the same human beings, but they found a way to unlock their potential, and I congratulate them for it. And as Charlie said earlier, China and the United States are going to be the superpowers for as far as the eye can see, and it is really good for us, in my view, that the Chinese have found the way to unlock their potential. And I think it's imperative for two countries with nuclear weapons that in this kind of world that they figure out ways to see the virtues in each other rather than the flaws. We'll have plenty of disagreements with the Chinese, and they will with us, but we ought to remember that on balance, we're both better off if the other one's doing well. That's just my own view. Okay. Station 3, please.
Hi, my name is
15
Arthur.
minutes.
I'm from Los Angeles. I wanted to thank you for having us in your hometown. And we've all been listening to your business prowess and all your successes. There's no question that you're good at business and finance and have fun doing it. But there are comments that you've made on income inequality, giving away 99% of your wealth. And I'm led to believe that you're motivated by more than just amassing wealth or financial gains. So I'd like to speak to your value core and ask what matters to you most and why.
Charlie, what matters to you most?
Well, I think that I had an unfortunate channeling device. I was better at figuring things out than I was at everything else. I was never going to succeed as a movie star or as an athlete or as an actor or something. And I early got the idea that, partly from my family, my grandfather in particular, whose name I bore, had the same idea, that really your main duty is to become as rational as you could possibly be. I mean, rationality was just totally worshipped by Judge Munger and my father and others. And since I was good at that and no good at anything else, I was steered in something that worked well for me. But I do think rationality is a moral duty. That's the reason I like Confucius. He had the same idea all those years ago. And I think Berkshire is sort of a temple of rationality. What's really admired around Berkshire is somebody who sees it the way it is. Wouldn't you agree with that, Warren?
Yeah,
more than anything, more than energy.
You better see it the way it is. Yeah.
What?
You better see it the way it is. Yeah.
You see it the way it is. And so that's the way I did it. But that goes beyond a technique for amassing wealth. To me, that's a moral principle. I think if you have some easily removable ignorance and keep it, it's dishonorable. I don't think it's just a mistake or a lack of diligence. I think it's dishonorable to stay stupider than you have to be. And so that's my ethos. And I think you have to be generous because it's crazy not to be. We're a social animal and we're tied to other people.
Well, I would say, it doesn't sound very noble, but what matters to me most now, and probably has for some time, I mean, there are things that matter that you can't do. There are things that matter that you can't do anything about. I mean, in terms of health and the health of those around you and all of that. But actually, what matters to me most is that Berkshire does well. That basically, I'm in a position where we've probably got 1 million or more people that are involved with us, and It just so happens that it's enormously enjoyable to me, so I can rationalize it, the activity. But I would not be happy if Berkshire were doing poorly. That doesn't mean whether the stock goes down or whether the economy has a bad year. But if I felt that we weren't building something every year that was better than what we had the year before, I would not be happy. I get this enormous fun out of it, and I get to work with people I like.
But that's very important. The truth of the matter is, it's easy for somebody like Warren or me to lose a little of our own money because it doesn't matter that much. But we hate losing somebody else's. And that's a very desirable attitude to have in a civilization. Don't you hate losing Berkshire money?
Yeah, it would. That would be the only thing that would keep me up at night. Yeah. We won't do it. We can lose money on individual things. Obviously, we can have bad years in the economy, and we can have years where the stock market goes down a lot. That doesn't bother me in the least. What bothers me is if I do something that actually costs Berkshire in terms of its long-term value. Then I feel I do not feel good about life on that day. But we can avoid most of that, fortunately. We do get to pick our spots. We're very fortunate in that respect.
Well, a good doctor doesn't like it when the patient dies on the table either, Not a new thought.
Okay, let's go to station 6.
Good afternoon, Warren and Charlie. Congrats on 50 years. My name is Jim, and I'm from Brooklyn, New York. This is kind of a follow-on to a recent question. You both had success in investing even before Berkshire Hathaway as investors and as fund managers. While it's well known you closely followed Graham's teachings, others like Walter Schloss and his son also had success with similar teachings yet different strategies. What would you cite as the most important reason for your early success with small amounts of capital? And given hindsight today, what might you have done to improve your strategy with these small funds?
Yeah, well, I had a great teacher. I had exceptional focus, and I had the right sort of emotional qualities that would help me in being an investor. I enjoyed the game. I mean, it's just about, hard enough to be interesting, but not so hard as to be beyond the capabilities of people understanding it. And that's kind of the way this game is. I mean, it's not like Henry Singleton kind of questions he took on. It's actually a pretty easy game, and it does require a certain emotional stability. And I went at it, hammer and tong. I went through the manuals and everything, but I was enjoying when I did it. And like I say, I started out between ages 7 and about 19. I had that same enthusiasm, but I didn't really have any guiding principle. And then I ran into The Intelligent Investor and Ben Graham, and then at that point I was able to take all this energy and everything, enthusiasm for it, and now I had a philosophy that made a lot of sense, total sense, and I found that I could employ, and so the game became even more fun. But it wasn't really more complicated than that. Charlie?
Well, I don't have anything to add. I do think that it's an easy game if somebody has the temperament for it and keeps at it because he likes it and is interested in it. I have a problem that Warren has less of. I don't like being too much an example to people who want to get rich by being shrewd and buying and passively holding securities. I don't think that's enough of a life. If you wrest a fortune from life by being shrewder than other people and buying little pieces of paper, I don't think that's an adequate contribution in exchange for what you're taking. So I like it when you're investing money for an endowment or a pension fund or your relatives or something, but I never considered it enough of a life to merely be shrewd and picking stocks and passively holding them.
Yeah, running Berkshire has been far, far more fun than running, in my case, Buffett Partnership or just an investment fund. I mean, that
you'd be less of a man if you'd run that partnership.
It'd be a crazy way to go through life.
Yeah.
I mean, it just, you know, Berkshire is incredibly more satisfying.
So if you're good at just investing your own money, I hope you'll morph into doing something more.
Okay, we'll do 8, and then we'll move on to the annual meeting.